So this is the deep politics segment of today's episode. We talked about Julian Assange and Tucker Carlson. That was more in the true politics on our media diet pyramid. And then after this, we'll talk about presidential polling, and that's a little bit the party politics part of our news media diet. But in this segment, we're talking about the World Economic Forum and the Davos agenda. This is more deep politics, analyzing forces that are at play beyond the parties and beyond even people's individual political beliefs, whether they're libertarian, socialist, conservative, reactionary, or otherwise. So who exactly is it that is able to imprison Julian Assange and keep him in prison for 5 years when the only crime he's been convicted of, as I mentioned, was topping bail, basically, which had a sentence of 11 months. And he only did that when he was worried that, he had real reason to believe that he would be extradited to the United States if he went to Sweden on these trumped-up charges of sexual misconduct. And sure enough, the Swedish government would not guarantee he wouldn't be extradited to the United States if he went there to face these charges that were clearly false. And he served well over the 11 months. So who is it that's keeping him locked up and why? There's a tremendous groundswell of people all over the world that believe he should be set free and that his only crimes have been political and that you cannot extradite someone based on political crimes. So who is it that's keeping him locked up? That's what we're going to talk about in this segment. So there's this thing called the World Economic Forum. It's this group of leaders, reactionaries I call them in Red, White, and Blind, people that want to consolidate power more and more into their own hands. But they get together in this place called Davos, this fancy resort in Switzerland, every year. Generally it's in January or February, so it just happened. The 2024 meeting just happened in January. And people get together in Davos, and this is Xi Jinping, the Prime Minister of China. This is people like Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk and people from all over the world that are in places of high power. And what exactly is it that people believe is going on here? What is it that's called the Great Reset or the Davos agenda? And just to spell it out quickly so that you understand what's being discussed here. What people are concerned is that what's going on is a plan to rule the world without national governments, to essentially get rid of national governments or to subjugate national governments underneath some unifying international government that would be not accountable to voters, that would be headquartered somewhere in possibly Davos or possibly some other remote place. And the reason that these fears are somewhat realistic, I think, or have real reason to be considered, why I'm talking about them, is because technology has gotten to the point where these kinds of things are possible. I think I have 1984 behind me on one of the books on the shelf. And, when George Orwell wrote that book, and there's these technology devices in the story where there's these television screens that are monitoring the people that are watching them and that are everyone's being spied on constantly. And at the time, that was not realistic technology. That didn't exist. But today it does. And some of the things that Julian Assange leaked through WikiLeaks that others leaked were projects such as one called Weeping Angel by the CIA that was turning appliances into spying devices. It was where they were going to place devices, and they did. There's evidence that in things like Nest home temperature systems, that they're placing microphones in those to spy on people, that they're turning smart TVs into devices to spy on people. Anything that is a smart device that comes into your home and requires a Wi-Fi connection. It always says, we need to connect to an app. We need a Wi-Fi connection for this reason or for that reason. And sometimes they're great devices that make our lives better. But you have to realize what you're paying. You're paying in your privacy. You're paying in your ability to live the way you want to live if you don't want somebody or anybody to know exactly what's going on in your home. So it's an aside. We'll talk about it maybe on a different segment in terms of how to equip your home in a way that you enjoy without sort of enabling all kinds of surveillance devices to be placed in your home. But so what is the agenda? Why would these things like Weeping Angel be developed? And it's a little bit difficult to understand it all, to parse it together, but there is this technology. Then you add in things like artificial intelligence that is leaps and bounds moving very quickly forward. Facial recognition that is also moving forward very, very quickly. Surveillance devices that are being placed in, I mean, they're not called surveillance devices, but cars these days have cameras on them, have microphones in them, and have Wi-Fi or cell network connectivity. And there's been countless instances where it looks like you can hack into a car remotely and tell it where to go or turn it off. And so, this would provide basically untraceable assassinations if you were able to just sort of hack into someone's car. So what is the Davos agenda? If you remember, a few years ago, there were these advertisements the World Economic Forum was placing into mainstream awareness through their various think tanks and their various video channels and things. And there were there these ads at one point where it said, "You'll own nothing and be happy, and everything will be delivered to you by a drone." And I can play a little bit of a segment of that right now. So yeah, that guy looks really happy. Does he own nothing? I'm not sure. He's probably just an actor. So the idea that people are concerned about is that the World Economic Forum and Davos seeks to act as a one-world government. And through things like pandemics or climate change or wars, these international crises. There's a saying, never let a good crisis go to waste, because in a crisis, when you can get people to be scared, when you can inflict fear into people, they become much, much more accepting and much more willing to surrender their power. So in these times of international crisis, we have seen over these last 5 years more and more power accruing to these single entity, not responsive to individual countries' government systems. In other words, we don't have a vote on whether the WHO gets to pass a pandemic treaty where they get to unilaterally from the UN or from Switzerland decide that everybody needs to get the next vaccine injection, or that everybody needs to stay at home or put masks on their kids' faces. We won't get a vote if these things go through, and these things are being discussed at the WHO and at Davos right now, and their laws already proposed. So that is, in essence, that's what the Davos agenda is, and that's what people are concerned about, is that there's this movement afoot to rule the world, in essence, from some shadowy buildings in Switzerland or elsewhere in the world. I mean, the technology exists. This is what's changed. These theories have been around. There's always probably been somebody who wants to rule the world. It's almost a cliche to say that. But what's different now is that the technology exists where a small group of people could accrue sufficient power to use this technology, to use home surveillance appliances, to use facial recognition, to use AI and machine learning to basically run the whole world, some small group of people to run the whole world. And they'll cloak it, like you see in the video, they'll cloak it in these great words. It's going to be an international order. We're going to have equality. We're going to have sustainability. But what do those words really mean? I mean, equality sounds great, but only if it's equality at a relatively good level of living. We don't want equality where everyone has nothing. You wouldn't say that if 97% of the world are slaves, that equality is a benefit. You don't have inequality anymore. but then instead what you've traded is something much worse. So now, is this a grand conspiracy theory? Is this all I'm talking about is a grand conspiracy theory? I mean, it is in a sense, right? I mean, I've talked quite a bit in Red, White, and Blind how the term conspiracy theory is overused. It's an intellectually lazy term to label anything that you don't actually want to think about. So when somebody says the election machines are insecure and they're running secret software code, that's not a conspiracy theory. That's just the truth, and we should investigate something like that. But it's called a conspiracy theory so that people don't have to think about it. People don't have to talk about it because they don't want to, or because people in power don't want you to. Similar with the vaccines, when it was somebody said, "Hey, these they never tested whether this would stop the spread of the virus." That was called a crazy conspiracy theory for months and months. Or even more clear was the origin of the virus. To say, "Oh, it came out of a lab." For a year and a half, that was considered a crazy conspiracy theory. Now, it was never a conspiracy theory. It was the truth. It was what was actually going on. But it was people thinking about things and discussing them. So in this instance, is this a conspiracy theory in the sense that it's something we shouldn't think about? Or is this a theory? And there are many theories. In science, you come up with theories, and then you should look at the evidence, and you should discard any theories that don't explain the evidence, the observed evidence, and you should hold on to the theories that best explain the observed evidence. So I'm not proposing at this time that it's clear that the World Economic Forum or Davos is a grand conspiracy to rule the world. What I'm saying is that there's enough evidence out there to look at this, that this is a theory that we should be considering. And I wanted people that watch Red, White, and Blind to be aware of what deep politics is. This would be part of it. It would be analyzing what goes on at Davos. Who are the people that get together there? What are the things they discuss? Some of it is they'll discuss, climate change, and they'll discuss that. But it's interesting when they discuss something like climate change, what they propose to do about it. If what they propose to do about it is something that will improve the environment, reduce pollution, something like that, it's hard for anybody to go against it. That sounds like a great idea. But when what they propose is something like forcing half of the world to dramatically reduce its use of power through, they can no longer burn coal, or they can no longer use fossil fuel, then it's a much more complicated issue, because you could say, well, okay, then you have to get into the whole discussion about CO2 and global warming. But on the other hand, you have to look at, well, if you're trying to rule the world and you're able to basically take out half of the world by consigning them to the 18th century in terms of the amount of power and energy they can use, that also is helpful in that. So it's one of these things that is important to think about and to consider if you're on the path to media consciousness, as I recommend in Red, White, and Blind. And like me, I'm somebody that's constantly learning things. I believe that as you come into contact with new evidence, with new phenomena, you should be open to revising your theories about what's going on in the world. And this is one example of that. So deep politics offers us a chance to look at things a little bit differently. When you find yourself really mired in pro-Trump or anti-Trump or pro-Biden or anti-Biden, or these narratives that are constantly thrown at us by the corporate media, you can take a step back and think, what if the greatest threat to democracy is not Joe Biden or is not Donald Trump, but is in fact this burgeoning technology, the AI and the machine learning and the surveillance and the facial recognition and the censored social media and the manufactured media narratives? What if that's actually the greatest threat? And what if the people utilizing that are actually not the people I see in the news at all, but are these distant would-be autocrats, the distant reactionaries who want to centralize power? It's something to consider. It's something to think about. And it may actually provide you with much more interesting conversations with people that you may disagree about some of the culture war issues here in the United States, but you may share quite a bit more about a desire to keep the United States, or to keep our own say over our internal and personal affairs. So there it is. Now you have the agenda, at least the purported agenda of the Davos group. What do you think? Will you own nothing and be happy? Will you eat the bugs? Or will you insist on maintaining your own sovereignty over your own affairs? I think that is one of the big questions that will face us, if not already, in the next coming years and decades. I could be wrong. I could be right. Call me crazy if you're lazy. That's how I see it. This has been Red, White, and Blind. We'll talk more in a moment. So just as a brief interlude here, this is still a very new channel that I'm just trying to build, and I wanted to propose and make an offer for you to support this channel if you'd be interested in doing so at a little bit more significant level than just watching the videos. We have a number of people who have already become contributing members and founding members, and if you'd like to do that, I would be delighted to be able to spend more time and put more energy and more resources into building this channel. If you become a contributing member or a founding member this month, you will get a free signed copy delivered to your door of Red, White, and Blind, the book that just came out last year, my book. If you've already read that, or if you'd like to have a different book, I would be happy to give you Double Happiness, which was my first book about my time in China. Or the other option is I could send a copy of one of these books to a friend. You'll also be supporting independent journalism, and you'll get a link. The minute each of these episodes air, you'll get the link to the full episode. If you'd like to remain a reading member, a subscriber, that's wonderful too. It's very helpful. That builds the channel as well. Feel free, please, to share any of this information, any of these segments with friends and family, and write a review of the book online if you're able to. That's very important because the algorithms of the great media behemoths of our time, the social media giants and the search engines, their algorithms are designed to suppress independent investigative journalism like this. I wouldn't have said that with certainty a couple of years ago, but having done the research I did for Red, White, and Blind and seeing it unfold, there's no doubt that this is happening now. It's quite clear. So your review, your comments on this video, your ability to share it and like the video, very, very important. If you're able to become a contributing member or a founding member, I would be eternally grateful, and please go ahead and do so now. The link is in the description. It's also here. You go to the Substack. That's where I'm managing subscriptions and my subscriber base. Well, what we say at Red, White, and Blind, what I say in the book, is that our media consumption is a diet. Think about a diet. Think about how you balance your diet. And take a look at your diet right now. Is it something that you find to be a nice, healthy mix? Are there major portions of your diet that are missing? One thing that we're going to talk about, not today, but in a future episode, is the balanced media diet. And I've been spending a lot of time just sort of on my own building out balancedmediadiet.com. I have enlisted the help of several other journalists who are friends, and we've put together the 2023 diet. That was last year. The 2024 diet should be out in the next couple of weeks or month, and that will also be available at balancedmediadiet.com. That's also something here that we're building, and any support that you give goes to that effort. One thing that you'll know if you've read Red, White, and Blind is that when we discuss and when I introduce the balanced media diet, I talk about 40 sources, 30 minutes, and $20. And that's a little bit just a sort of a slogan to have to use nice round numbers. You don't actually have to have 40 sources to balance your diet. That's the expert level. You can balance your diet with as few as 14 sources, and I propose that in the basic balanced diet. The 30 minutes is what I do recommend as a minimum amount of time per day that you spend to become an informed member of our society and our culture. If you want to spend less time than that, we can figure that out. And if you want to spend more, that's where the intermediate diet and the advanced diet come into play with 60 minutes a day. Or if you're really interested and want to spend more time, 2 hours a day, you'll really find your way to media consciousness quickly. It's really interesting to read a broad variety of sources on different stories. Now with the $20, that's an amount that I propose as a minimum monthly amount that you contribute to journalists that you find of use and of value. So when I'm saying this and to become a founding member or a contributing member of Red, White, and Blind, certainly that'd be great. If you'd like to do that in addition to supporting several other journalists that you find useful, or instead, you don't have to support Red, White, and Blind. You can support some of the media journalists, some of the independent journalists that you find to be useful and important. They might be ones that I've listed in the Balanced Media Diet or others that you found. So that's the 40 sources, 30 minutes, and $20. All right, that's it. Let's get back to the show.